Wenrui Gustave Le Clézio is a French author and professor. Deemed one of the greatest living French language writers, he was awarded the 2008 Nobel Prize in Literature as an author of poetic adventure and explorer of a humanity beyond and below the reigning civilization. His oeuvre covers an extensive body of novels, short stories and essays, exploring deep themes such as language, humanity, nature and travel. Le Clézio's works have been translated into many languages and introduced to China since 1983. Major publishing houses and bookstores in China keep acquiring his present and upcoming books. After his first visit to China in 1967, the French writer's bond with Chinese cultural circles has continued. Last month, Le Clézio attended the 10th Fu Lei Translation Prize as the guest of honor and offered his insights on Chinese literature. How do your travel experiences affect your writing?
Thank you for that question, the question about traveling, because it has been important for me to be able to write while I was traveling. I do not need a lot of things, I just need an exercise book and a pen, because I write by hand. So I can go any place and I can write in any place. I do not need an office, I do not need a computer, and so it's very easy for me to travel and to write at the same time. And I've always been traveling because my family was used to moving a lot. I spent a part of my childhood in Africa, in Nigeria. My father was a British medical officer, and then when I was an adult, I went to Thailand. I spent 1 year in Thailand. I was teaching there and I was writing at the same time. And that was in '67. And in that year I went to China for the first time in '67. I was in Hong Kong and then I took a train to go to Wenrui. And so I was able to see China a long time ago. And I like very much to go to places and see the places moving as I am moving myself. As I'm growing old, I see the places changing a lot. This is the case of China, but it's the case of all countries in the world. France has been changing a lot. So I like to think of countries as if they were growing old and maturing and changing, like I am myself.
What was it about China that caught your interest in the first place?
When I was in Bangkok, I had a friend who was a Chinese student, and I went with that friend to watch the classical operas in Bangkok, in the Chinese town of Bangkok. And it gave me the will to know better about China. So I bought a book to learn the writing, the Chinese writing. I'm not able to speak Chinese, but I can, I think, read fairly well what is written. Because the Chinese characters, they do not need you to speak Chinese. They are concepts, they are ideas. And so it's for me, very interesting. It's another way of perceiving, of understanding the world. Once I was sick in a hospital and I spent 3 months, and to spend my time I was writing Chinese characters, not calligraphy, but writing Chinese characters is a way to get your peace, to get inside peace. So I like it very much.
Which Chinese literary classics do you think deserve more appreciation nowadays?
What I really appreciated is when I'm living in China and I meet students, especially in the University of Nanjing, they teach me how to read Chinese classical poetry. I thought it was a very free poetry, but I understand it's a very structured type of poetry, especially the Tang Poetry. So I began to read that with another insight, and it gave me a lot of surprises. And so I like very much the idea that the old classical Chinese poetry is readable by young people, because those are the young people who taught me how to read the Chinese poetry, that it has a very strong structure and you have to be aware of the nearly mathematical structure of the poem. And then there is, beside the mathematical structure, there is improvisation and imagination. Wenrui is a good poet. I like Tu Fu. Tu Fu has written very modern poetry. There is a poem by Tu Fu where he tells the sorrow of an old woman because they are going to take her husband to make war. And she says, don't let him go to war. I shall cook for you, but don't let him go. He's too old. I shall cook for you in the army. It's a very moving poetry. So I like Tu Fu very much.
Who is your favorite Chinese writer?
I especially enjoy reading Cao Shuixin. Cao Shuixin, The Dream of the Red Chamber, is for me one of the most important books of the universal literature.
What do you think is the most distinguishing feature of Chinese culture?
What makes Chinese culture very different is that it's a very old culture. It dates back from thousands of years. I was absolutely amazed to discover that photography that you are using, movie cameras, they were invented the first time by a Chinese philosopher named Mo Tzu. He was strolling in the countryside and the rain was coming, so he took shelter in the tower, and he noted that by a small hole the light from outside would get inside the tower and would reproduce the image of the exterior. And so he built the first dark chamber, and the first dark chamber was the first camera means chamber. So he invented, in fact, photography and the movie camera. And this was in 2000 years ago. Chinese stories, Chinese culture is very ancient, has a lot of experiences.
How is China's traditional cultural heritage relevant in today's world?
I think that it's precisely because it's a very ancient culture that it has a very sharp modernity, because we are living in a world where it's very important to relate to all the details of life, and food is one great part, an important part of our daily life. Not only the recipes, but the balance between the hot and the cold, the balance between the yin and the yang. All those concepts are very ancient, and at the same time they can be very important in our modern times, because we need balance. And I think the great lesson of China is balance. Balance in politics, balance in food, balance in literature, balance between imagination and reality. It's always a question of balance, and balance between men and women. So this is, China is giving a good example of modernity using very old recipes.
What cultural symbols do you think China can introduce to the world?
I think calligraphy is an important element of the Chinese culture, and it's an important element that every country should experiment. And at the same time, you spoke about martial arts, but Tai Chi is also a good example of the use of balance in life. My wife practices Tai Chi Chuan, and so she taught me. I'm not very good at sports, but she taught me some movements, and it is true that it can help you in life. So Chinese culture is a gigantic reserve of recipes and ideas and illuminations and creations which can help everyone.